Well, good morning. Guess what we've got today?
Yep, a Peugeot 207cc. I'm kind of guessing here, if you're a woman, you'll probably like something like this, where you can fold the roof down and get your hair blown around in the wind. Yeah, I don't know, it looks like a pretty alright kind of car. I tell you what though, I wouldn't want to be a rear seat passenger. I'm quite small and there really isn't much room in the back there.
Okay then, I'll run you through this little problem. This Peugeot, it came in here basically for an aircon regas. But the story was, when the engine's cold, the aircon works. So you can start the car up, switch the aircon on, and you'd get the distinctive click sound coming from your compressor, which is like the pump, the aircon pump. And then a few seconds later, the cooling fans would cut in, which they're supposed to. The car would then warm up to like normal operating temperature. The aircon would be working constantly, perfectly fine, freezing cold air inside the car. And then all of a sudden, the aircon compressor would just cut out and there would be no live feed to the aircon compressor. It would be dead. And it was a bit bizarre. I couldn't quite work it out. So I connected our scanner up and it showed basically P0599. Controlled thermostat, short, or short to earth or something like that, or positive to earth. But basically I had to Google that code because I didn't know really what it related to. I was kind of suspecting it was relating to the temperature sensor, which is on top of the thermostat housing, which can be confusing because that was not the problem. I did actually change that thermostat temperature sensor. Made no difference whatsoever. So anyway, after a little bit of digging on the internet, I found that there is, on these cars, they have what's called an electric thermostat. And the connector for the thermostat is a little bit hidden. You can't see it from the top. You've got to like take some pipes out of the way to see it properly. Otherwise, you might not know it's there. I'll show you it in a minute. So after doing some digging on the internet, I realised people were saying these electric thermostats, either the resistance or whatever goes wrong with them, when they go outside their limits or they burn out, they log this fault code. The ECU then shuts down the air conditioning system to save engine power. I would have thought though, if anything went wrong with the cooling system, it would have put the fans on constantly, so at least you got constant cooling. I remember on a lot of the Fords, if the temperature sensor packed up or something like that, it would put the fans on. You know, keep them blowing to try and cool the car. Anyway, I'll show you this thermostat housing because I've got a brand new one and I'm going to fit it to the car now. But I'm going to show you, it's a bit of a pig of a job.
This is the old thermostat I've just removed from the car. At the top of these thermostat housings, this is your temperature sensor. This is the one I initially thought was the problem, but it wasn't. In actual fact, I'm going to show you something now. So this is the reason I replaced this sensor straight away and thinking it probably was the issue. This is how it came. Two wires sticking out of the sensor with a load of silicone sealant in there. Somebody's obviously cut the connector off for whatever reason and just stuck them wires in there. And obviously I thought, that's going to be the problem. So I put a new sensor in the housing and I found a new plug connector for a piece of wire and connected a new wiring loom basically and connector. So now back to our thermostat housing. Now I know the coolant temperature sensor wasn't the problem. Around the other side of this housing, there it is. There's our electric thermostat. And this little part here, the plug connector goes on here. This controls our opening and closing of our thermostat. And it's I don't know if it's a bit hard to see, but you can see the end of the thermostat in there. So that connector there is what's going to open and close this thermostat. And obviously when the electrical part of this burns out or goes wrong, it logs a fault code on the ECU. And then obviously, for whatever reason they've designed it, it shuts down the aircon. I'm going to point something out because I'm just about to put a new one on the car now. But when you take this thermostat housing off, it's held on by three little little bolts, one 10mm and two 8mm. And there's different versions of these housings depending on what variation engine you've got. This little part of the hose here, this goes around the back of the engine, and there's an O-ring, and it was a bit of a pig to get off. Even there's like a big, this slides in to another pipe, and then there's a spring clip which clips in there in that ridge and holds this on. But even with the spring clip taken completely off, it was a bit of a pig to get off. I had to spray some lubricant down here to try and get in here and keep wriggling it until it come out. So I'm going to, on the new one, I'm going to put a bit of silicone lubricant so to ease it going it back in, because the pipe this goes into seemed a little bit flimsy and it moved about quite a bit. Right then, facet. I got this housing from Millfield Autos in Peterborough. It's a aftermarket part, but hey, what the hell, it was cheap. I think it was like £55 plus VAT or something like that. But it comes with a seal, obviously. It also comes with your temperature sensor, and the actual thermostat electrical part. I didn't, as I'm going to point out, this is sealed, so you can't replace this. This is all a sealed unit. To replace this, you've got to buy the whole lot. It's all one piece. So anyway, I'm now going to stick this back on the car and see if it works. So I've just tried to push this thermostat housing pipe into the pipe on the back of the engine, but I was having a bit of difficulty because at the top here there's like a hole where there's a stud goes through it, and the stud goes into the engine. I've removed the stud because it was giving me no room to like twist the housing, so this would actually push in. So actually taking this stud out, and there's a little wee bit on the end of it, so it's not too bad to take out. With this removed, it's a lot easier to fit that thermostat housing, well, this pipe onto the back of the engine. So now it's on, I'll refit this stud. This is the spring clip that holds the pipe to the back of the engine, and I had to remove this actual clip from the pipe, push the new thermostat housing into the pipe, and then put this clip on afterwards. It's a bit of a tight situation to work in, and it's a bit of a pig. I'm having to use my phone to film this, but there down the back of the engine you can see where our pipe pushes into the pipe at the back of the engine. Notice that spring clip. It's a little bit tricky to get your hands down there and put that on, but obviously it is doable. And something here I should have mentioned earlier, if you do have the misfortune to have to replace one of these thermostat housings, you will have to remove your air cleaner box, your battery and your battery tray. And there's quite a lot of wires that are clipped onto the actual battery tray, which will all have to be unclipped. But your engine ECU, you don't have to disconnect that. You can just swing that straight from your battery tray. That will sit like that. You can swing that just out to one side. We're all connected back up now. Just going to point something out. I've refilled the cooling system with water. Generally speaking, there's a bleed nipple on the heater hose right down the back of the engine by the bulkhead where the hose goes through into the heater unit. There's a little like valve cap you undo to let the air out. I haven't undone that because it just filled up with water and the water kept going in. So I don't think I'm going to have to bleed it. If I do, I'll let you know, but so far I've left it alone. If I don't have to bleed it, I'm not going to touch it. I'll just start the engine up. Now when I press the aircon button, we should hear the distinctive click of the compressor cutting in. So hopefully you heard that click, that's the air compressor cutting in. I've set the heater controls to the hot position so I can get the water circulated through the heater unit and make sure there's no air in there, or if there is air in there it will come out properly. I'm hoping I haven't got to touch that bleed nipple on the back of the heater hose because it's a bit of a sod to get to. The aircon compressor is kicked in and that's working fine. The engine cooling fan is working with the air conditioning as it's supposed to. So I'm just going to let the engine heat up now and see if this air conditioning carries on working. What I'll probably do is
after I've had it running, ticking over for so long, and I know that the thermostat's opened and all the water circulated properly, I'll then take the car around the block up the road and give it a good run, then come back and see if it's still working.
Well, the heater seemed to be staying cold, so I cracked off the valve cap on the heater hose and a little bit of air come out of that. Then it sprayed out of water, so that was fine. But then I noticed, which I should have seen to start with, on top of the thermostat housing, there's like a nut here. You undo this nut and that lets the air out of the thermostat housing. Once I'd done that, it was fine. The heater warmed up straight away. So now I'll carry on running the engine and make sure the thermostat opens fully, and then I'll give it a good long road test.
I've had this running for like 15 minutes now. The cooling system seems to have warmed up perfectly fine. The aircon's still working, so I'm going to go and have a cup of tea just to kill some more time. I don't know if you can see this too well, but all the condensation is building up on the outside of the aircon pipe, and this pipe is absolutely freezing cold, so that's working well. Now, before I replace that thermostat, if this engine was cold and I started it up and ran it, after about 20 minutes the aircon would have just stopped working and it would have gone warm inside the cabin here. This car has now been running for the best part of an hour. The compressor is still going strong, the cooling fan is still working as it should be, and I'll tell you what, the driver's air vent that's blowing out the cold air onto my arm here is freezing my arm. And I know some cars, the aircon don't work that well, but this little car is absolutely pucker. Flipping heck, on a nice hot summer's day, this will certainly keep you cool. I consider this car fixed. I reckon these electric thermostats, they're probably a common problem, but I don't work for Peugeot, so I wouldn't really know, and this is my first time I've ever had this situation. But I reckon a lot of guys who work for Peugeot would probably be quite familiar with these. Anyway, job done. There's only one thing left to do with this then, isn't there? Yeah! Happy bloody thermostats! Anyway, till the next time, see ya!